if you're watching this, raise your hand if you failed phishing tests. Well, I did. I'm pretty sure I did. And I even got contacted by a security team back then and said, "Hey, why did you just happen? I really thought it was HR. Couldn't help it. Just didn't check all the checks and balances. Can happen."
Welcome to the DevSec For Scale podcast, the show that makes security a first-class citizen for growing companies. My name is Jeremy Hest, Head of Developer Relations at Achilles, the secrets management SaaS platform. Welcome back, everyone, to the DevSec For Scale podcast. With me for the third time in our three-part series about secrets management is Jeroen Willemsen, and he is the OWASP project lead for the Wrong Secrets project. You should definitely look that up if you haven't already seen our previous or listened to our previous episode or episodes. You'll find in the links there, and you'll find in the show notes for this one as well. And so, Jeroen, we've discussed everything from sort of the basics of secrets management and trends and OWASP stuff. The top 10, for example. We talked more in detail about the Wrong Secrets project and how you're helping developers understand where their secrets are, how they're stored, what they're doing wrong, how they can figure out what they're doing wrong in order to make things safer in the future. Let's talk a little bit more zoomed in terms of, how do we bring all of this stuff together that we've learned about, everything you've done from, the OWASP Wrong Secrets project down through, how people can distill all this information. Where do you get started with secrets management?
So, where do you get started? This might sound a little bit weird, but let's take two steps back. If you want to know why secrets management is important, we've shown so many examples in the Wrong Secrets project, but these are just examples from things that were important to other people in life. Those might not be important to you as a listener. So instead, let's try to do a threat model exercise yourself and ask yourself, what are the risks for my applications, my landscape, my services, my company, and also for your private secrets management? What are the risks you are afraid of if it comes to identity, et cetera, that you might want to get control over? So what is a secret to you? Once you know what you want to have as a secret, then with the Wrong Secrets project, you can see all these different types of threats and misconfigurations and problems that can occur to actually, show the secret. And from there on, just continue and understand how to work with that based on the resources we'll also share after the podcast, I believe, right? The OpenSAM stuff and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what is a secret to you is not necessarily a secret to me. Of course, I may think that it's not a secret, but I may be wrong, right? I mean, we talk about something that seems like, banal piece of information. It could be a very important piece of information to any hacker. So we definitely have to keep in mind what information we want. And one of the things that we actually talked about earlier off camera was a little about, it doesn't really matter how many secrets you have. The point isn't to say, well, if I have 1,000 secrets, I mean, that's so much information. I need to figure out where it belongs, who it belongs to, how to give access to it. But if you have a proper platform, a proper management tool to be able to deal with it, you can figure all that out. You set it all up correctly from the beginning, and it doesn't really matter how many secrets you have and how many you need to use. It just matters that you set it up properly with the right security and the right access roles and permissions.
Exactly, and for that, it's what can really be helpful is have a look at the OWASP secrets management cheat sheet, because it shows some angles to start with. It also links to the OWASP SAM project, and from there on, you'll find hundreds of different resources you can dive into to get a feeling for, okay, how do I then manage these secrets? How can I make this scalable? There's not really a good or bad in how you do it. The only thing you have to keep in mind is the moment somebody has it on its computer, you lost. So maybe there is a bad, unless of course you trust the person who has it on its computer and you are sure that he will never connect to the internet, never download malware, do something weird, never leave your company, etc.
Never.
Okay, so in that case, maybe just don't get it on the computer and start moving from there. and let's just have a go with it. And again, you can't do this wrong. It's like a journey. Secrets management is something that continuously keeps on evolving. So just start with understanding what is a secret to you and why. Once you're motivated enough, you can motivate the people around you to understand the why of why this is supposed to be a secret. You can move ahead. Um, there are a few blockers on the road ahead of you, by the way, because there will be people shouting in your face, "This is not a secret. Why do you think this is important?" So make sure you really understand the why. You can actually get common sense over that. Otherwise, the secrets management itself is not that hard. It's us, the people, that make this terribly difficult.
It's always the humans. It's always the humans. So that brings us to the next point. Defaults are always sort of, a lot of times people just say, well, all right, well, whatever setup that they give me, it must be that it's pretty secure, right? I mean, whoever's giving me this tool, whoever's helping me set this up, I know that their configuration is going to be solid, right? But we probably shouldn't just trust the default. So what do you think would be an easy and recommended setup if you wanted to do some work, compute online and manage secrets?
Unfortunately, it starts with RTFM, and that's tough because let's assume you have a beautiful cloud provider platform in use. Well, good luck with all the docs that come with there in their security sections very often, but you do have to go through them first, because many of these things are built in a way that it's easy to use, but not necessarily that it's secure the way you want it to be. So start with reading. Just continue reading until you get a feeling for I understand what's happening. If you don't feel you understand what's happening, contact your provider if you have support, or go to open source fora or to something like OWASP Slack and just ask the questions you're unsure of. Um, and don't worry, you're not the only one. The first time I read some of those docs, I was like, wait, what? And then it still took me 4 months later to realize for some of these documents that, oh, we always forgot to implement option X. Oh, that's why this is so open. Oops, that's completely normal. Um, Embrace it, um, and work at it, and ask people to validate after once you've chosen the right options. And this unfortunately holds for almost every secrets management platform, because everybody wants you to start quickly, get productive, not necessarily be as secure as you might want to be. For those who are listening right now and feel like, yeah, but we're not a bank. We don't need bank grade security. We don't need military grade security. We just want the secret to be tossed out somewhere else than the rest of the stuff. That can be genuinely fine as well. At the other end, if you create something or you keep track of data of other people because of reasons, you don't want that data to leak either, just as much as a bank doesn't want to do that. So you might want to consider still reading those docs and just see for how far you want to go.
Fantastic. Yeah. Trust none of the things, I guess, right? And sometimes don't even trust yourself, right? Trust that you have at least enough of a base to start, and then from there try to break into your own environments, find your own secrets, find your own bugs and problems, and then ask other people to validate them as well, and find new ones, things that you haven't, and keep going from there.
Exactly. That's as easy as it. Well, not as easy. It's just a continuous process. And if you don't stop the process, it will always remain easy because you'll be able to move with baby steps and then run and then eventually fly. Um, and if you then, again, by the way, see other people ask similar questions in the fora you started with, please be a lady or a gentleman and answer them. They can really use your help. We all can use each other's help in this field. It's just as easy as that.
Absolutely. And the safest way to keep something is to keep nothing, right?
Definitely is. Definitely is. So, for instance, if you look at Wrong Secrets, if we go a little bit back in that project, um, we are trying to use almost all the different type of secrets storage solutions that you probably could use if it comes to the cloud vendor or if it comes to Kubernetes. And later we'll do the same thing with Nomad and stuff like that. And the mistakes configured over there were actually mistakes we found in the wild. So if you do something wrong, quote unquote, um, don't feel bad about it because you're not the first one. Don't worry, okay? Just rotate the secret and start over. That's basically it. So, like we said earlier, I think in episode 1, make sure you can rotate your thing. If you really need to have the secret, make sure you can rotate it. If you can't, then think about why you do it the way you do it.
Yep, absolutely. That reminds me of an interesting thing I remembered about when I was doing a little bit of work with AWS KMS. When you try to rotate an encryption key on AWS, it doesn't just rotate the key. It actually creates a new one with the same key information and just a new, and you rotate it by the alias. That was a new one for me. I mean, I'm sure people listening know this for a long time, but that was one that kind of got me. It was like, really? You have to actually just totally create a new ID and then put the same key information into that new ID? That's a new one. But all right, everyone, has their own way of doing it, and this is what they have for now. So getting back to a little bit more about secrets management, obviously secrets management in runtime is very well known. We need to push secrets into pods, for example, in Kubernetes, things like that. But we sometimes miss the idea of the CI/CD and how important that is. I mean, we obviously know you need a CI/CD pipeline these days. I mean, DevOps just makes sense. But where should people start when talking about secrets management specifically for their CI/CD pipelines?
So let's go back to. So before I answer your question, first of all, I love the question because CI/CD is pretty difficult, and we'll find out together in a moment, I guess, why. But let's start with a threat model, shall we?
Always.
All right, cool. So what are we afraid of? We're afraid of that whatever we try to protect gets leaked. This is very abstract. Let's make this concrete. Okay, we have a Kubernetes cluster somewhere, and we need to connect to an AWS account, and over there we got tons of data, and we just need to work with that. All right, let's try that way.
Right.
The AWS keys are currently a secret that the CI/CD needs to, for instance, inject into the pod. Well, shall we try to use that as a starting point?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, what we want to make sure of is if we go back a little bit and think a little bit about the risks. Let's assume an employee has access to those keys eventually. There's a few things he could do with the keys. For instance, he could, let's say, delete all the data in that account because, hey, if I'm not making enough money, you shouldn't either, boss. Or we have that person having access to the key, and it's just overly scoped in terms of the account he get access to, and he's like, if I'm not getting paid enough, let's make AWS pay us, as in, hey, let's install a few crypto miners or a few other things that can make money for us. And there's also other things like, hey, if I'm gone with this job, I would like to know what happens with my data. So why shouldn't I keep that AWS key with me from here onward? So all that doesn't really sound really well. But that's of course far-fetched risks, right? So how do we get there? You need to get access to the keys. And I think there's about 3 ways in the CI/CD system how you can get access to those. The first one is obviously if it's some sort of variable stored within the CI/CD system itself, right? Whether it's an obfuscated variable or an environment variable or whatever. For instance, GitLab and GitHub both have this idea of, so I think GitHub has secrets and just normal variables, but you can still, of course, get access to those if you have the right rights. And GitLab has something like job variables or something, which can be obfuscated and limited. But hey, if you have access, you have access. You can still just get them. So let's assume so that's the first threat vector. The second one will be, of course, is a job that, of course, needs the secrets. Needs to have access to the secret. So what we can do with the job? Well, we can make it echo the secret because, hey, echo is just a command, right? But we could also, if other people are looking at the job logs and we don't want to, be visible, we could also send it over to some other place. And now the easiest thing to think is, of course, oh yeah, they will send it over to a controlled entity somewhere else outside of my network. Well, it could also just be your S3 bucket where you guys as admins just have access to, or your Google Drive account, your corporate Google Drive account, even so. Because it just needs to be a part where you have access to. Hmm. Okay, so these will be like the threads, right? So you either have direct access, or you echo it, or you send it over. Make sense?
Yep, absolutely. So where do you start from there then? Now you have to talk about permissions and access, making sure that not everybody has access to everything within, for example, an S3 bucket.
Exactly. And now it gets complicated because now how far do you want to go? So uh, let's start with your CI/CD system. Let's limit access to the from the developers to those environment variables, right? To those special secrets and stuff. Now you might already hear some of the engineers in your team shouting, "Hey, you can do my job." Well, they never have to see it, but hey, that's their way of thinking of freedom, maybe. So, well, here's human actor problem number one. It doesn't mean that they want to have benign access, just the way they used to work. But let's assume we jot that down, right? We just, I'm sorry, sir, you can do your job by letting the job run, so you don't longer need this. Have a great day. Sure. Okay. So now that's locked down. So now we can just echo it. Okay, because the job still has access, remember, so the job can just echo the secret or send it over. So most of these systems have these masks for, so GitLab, GitHub, and a few others have secret masking when it's defined as a secret. So we just triple encode it, and it's no longer masked. Okay, so that didn't really work, did it now? By the way, that's also a challenge in wrong secrets, fun to have a look at. At the same time, let's assume we don't echo it because hey, everybody can see our job log, so everybody can see that we we were baddies over there. All right, so we shouldn't do that. So now we just silently send it over to something else. Now you could of course argue, oh, we can isolate our runners, firewall them, that they can never reach the internet. Well, they still have to reach places within your network to do their job where the admin also has access to. Ooh, okay. So let's assume we close that down, that it no longer has internet access, that we check our runner logs, etc., and we wish the best for double encoding, and that nobody listens to this podcast and will never try to double or triple encode their secret and get somewhere. If you listen to this, by the way, it's your own risk to do this, blah, 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 yada, yada. Please inform your boss if it works so they can rotate the secret, blah, 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 yada, yada. Thank you. So what do we do then, right? Then apparently we need to make something in between that has the secret where nobody has access to, so the CI/CD system starts something else that does the work for us, and that then needs to be isolated. Holy crap, that's a lot of work. Now we need a Kubernetes cluster for the Kubernetes cluster to do their job, or at least a pod inside a namespace in your cluster to do some CI/CD work or whatever.
And you have to authenticate everything.
Yes, this now you get to the exact problem because now we need to secure the authentication means of whatever is going to do that workload. Because if we didn't do that right, we'll get access to that as well.
And look, that's another secret. Who knew?
Exactly. So it really boils down here to what is an acceptable risk to you as whoever is steering this, or whatever is an acceptable risk to your boss. Dear engineers, if you're listening to this, I know your security team sometimes can be like I am, a pain in the bottom. Apologies for that, but please ask them what is acceptable and work together towards whatever the acceptable risk is. Because it might very well be that the response might be, if they double encode it and they really want to have it, let's make sure we rotate more often. We don't care. We don't want this complexity. We want you guys to go live yesterday. That could be the answer. The other answer could also be, oh, you're totally right. Here's your new backlog for the upcoming 9 months that you have to work on. Well, at least you got a job then. So yeah, just check out what you need and ask. And as those who actually need to accept the risk, if you're listening to this podcast or if you're listening to engineers pointing you at this podcast, ask yourself, what could really go wrong? And am I willing to accept that? Or are there other ways to mitigate the fact that this is just one boily thing? Now, last note about that, and then I'll stop ranting, is if you secured your CI/CD system in terms of access and whatever, it should be the case that only your internal engineer, etc., have access to it. Aside if you're a public company creating public assets with a big CI/CD pipeline in terms of transparency, but that's not, that's 99% of the people that might be listening to this might not be part of such a company. So let's assume it is private stuff. You might say, oh, but we only have 100 engineers having access to this, so it shouldn't hurt. And this specific case is only for 5 engineers. That's true. But those 5 engineers can also click a phishing link, get backdoored, and go continue. And they can say, oh, you should never click a phishing link. If you're watching this, raise your hand if you failed phishing tests. Well, I did. I'm pretty sure I did. And I even got contacted by a security team back then and said, hey, why did you just happen? I really thought it was HR. Couldn't help it. Just didn't check all the checks and balances. Can happen. Then all of a sudden, that beautiful employee that does so much work for you to secure your stuff now became an attack vector. So, of course, we don't do this to scare you, to spread FUD, etc. But at least based on this, make an educated guess, because it's still a guess, and an estimate of how much work you want to put in here. Because by now, I think we both described this as an endless road with lots of stuff we can secure in turtles upon turtles to secure the base keys. But try to make that easy, basically.
Let's start like most projects, right? Where you start from a base set of ideas and things that you want to cover. And once you get to that level where things are running properly and well, from there, close a little bit more, secure a little bit more as you go. And eventually you get to a point, I guess, where from a business perspective, you are okay to now be in production. And once you get to that point, that is, I guess, that for your threat model is acceptable enough. And you can still continue, of course, closing more gaps wherever they are, but at least get to the point where you're ready for production.
Exactly. And make sure the MVP is as minimalistic as possible, like minimum viable product of your CI/CD setup. Because after all, if we don't deploy your product to production, nobody's going to make money. So before everybody now says like, oh, they just saw Candidates 13 and wrong secrets, you really have to do all the complicated stuff they just described. Well, not calling it complicated because it's hard to sell, right? Let's start simple. Just put the stuff in, just make it run, and you need to iterate. Because otherwise, we as security often have to remember if there's nothing in production, then there's no value. And there's no reason for us security to even be there. So let's make sure we create value first and then secure it even more.
Perfect. Now, the last question I'm going to ask you for this one, Jeroen, is how do we start getting a little bit more advanced with, let's say, multi-cloud secrets management? Generally we speak about like one provider, maybe adding Kubernetes, but now we're talking about various clouds that you have to deal with secrets for all of them. It's hard to keep them in one specific place. I mean, you have platforms for that, you have tools for that as well. But what are some ways to get started and resources that listeners could use to start thinking about that next level?
I think unfortunately that starts with understanding the clouds you're running on and understanding that the security model of each of the clouds is a bit different. Not completely different. It's not like it's a whole different universe. It's just the patterns are a little bit different. So let's assume, for instance, you have Azure and AWS. So Azure Key Vault manage their secrets a little bit different and has access management done a little bit different than, for instance, AWS does. So make sure you first read up on that and understand the differences and understand which model you want to strive for. And make sure you I would recommend trying to unify that in some sort of way so that both behave in a way that it's expected and that it's becomes hard to make mistakes. Because if you both use them the way they are intended to be used, then eventually you make the mistake by giving somebody access to a lot more secrets than you're supposed to, which shouldn't be a problem when you rotate, blah, blah, blah. But let's
Try
start
to
with
try
understanding
to
that.
automate though. Try to automate things.
Good point. Automate first, not see you later. Again, reading the docs for that will really help. Um, and then see like, okay, can we indeed, for instance, deploy it in one cloud and then synchronize to the other? Or can we have more like a unified secrets management solution, like a third party solution that we could use that can be connected to both the cloud providers and then provide the secrets from there onward? Obviously, for some of the secrets, you might still need to use the cloud provider solution, but at least then understand the differences. And keep everybody educated on those differences and make sure you, again, unify as much as possible.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the resources that you wanted to point some people to for sort of continued learning on secrets management?
So there's a few things that can really help. Also in the room, they'll be of course at the end of the in the podcast notes. I presume
Yep,
there's
absolutely.
there's the OWASP cheat sheet on secrets management. There's also one on key management and a few others, and they can help you to get a feeling for a few things. Also on CI/CD actually. And then really go through the cloud providers related secrets management documentation like Azure Key Vault, AWS Secrets Manager, and all these sort of things. If you're then running on something like AWS, have a look at the well-architected framework security pillar, because secrets are just a small topic with lots of security layers around them to actually make this work. So you better read stuff around it as well. And then there's the OWASP SAM entry on secrets management. And of course, it's great to start over there, but also have a look at the rest of OWASP SAM, because it really helps you to understand the context again, because all the layers of security around secrets management. If you're done with these and you already have one of those secrets management platforms next to whatever you have, make sure you understand how it works. I think that will be the great starting point. Oh, and let's not forget, we talked about CI/CD. Please read the docs on your CI/CD setup and how you can, do the airbuck and the sort of things. And also read up on whatever you use for scheduling your workloads, whether that's Nomad or Kubernetes or uh, Docker Swarm or whatever. Just make sure you read wherever you about whatever it is that hits your secret.
Perfect. Well, Jeroen, this has been an adventure. 3 parts to this podcast series, really comprehensive about secrets management, from everything from just talking about trends and where secrets management is going to wrong secrets and how the project helps developers every day, to figuring out just where to get started and how to get more advanced. So I really appreciate all your time for this series. It's been fantastic for me, and I'm sure our listeners have gained a lot of knowledge from them. So thank you for your time. And as I say at the end of every podcast, stay secure. So thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It was really a pleasure.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Bye-bye.